look into a new component in data and event processing, which is a data mapper component. Okay, so let me drag and drop the component here. Okay, let's give the property ID as data mapper and maybe give the same name in the label also. Okay, so what is this about? I'll just explain you. So before that, let's configure a few other components. So let's configure it here as maybe first name. Okay, let's give the other one as maybe last name. Okay, so what happens is, let's suppose this is like a form, right? You are building first name and last name. So as you have seen here, what I will do, I will just preview this to explain you basically what happens with this kind of a form and how the data is stored in the data structure. So as you already know, we have two text fields. So whenever we write anything over here, if I write here as test and test last name, I'm just writing anything here. So when we will see this thing into the console, so how this data is stored is in this format, right? First name and last name. So these two things are stored in a separate manner, right? But let's suppose you want to manipulate this data in such a way that you want to store this thing into an array of object. What it means is you want to store test and last name as an object, and that object is something kept in an array. So this is what you want to do. So for that, this data mapper is used. Okay. So how to configure this is in the data mapper, we have this setting, right, which we have already configured, display layout and all those things. Here we have this trigger type. So what is this trigger type? So as we progress ahead, you will see this trigger type in many of the components. So let me explain you this. What is this trigger type? We have match, we have watch and manual. So manual means like at what point or how we want to trigger this data mapper. We want to manually trigger this. So this data mapper component won't be triggered automatically, but we need to manually configure that setting to trigger this thing. So then we will keep it in a manual. But if we are keeping it on a watch, then in that case, it will watch something, okay, that we will configure over here. So if that configured input value changes, this data mapper watches for it and automatically triggers. So this is kind of an automatic thing we can say, and manual is something a manual piece which we trigger manually, and this is automatically triggered. Okay, so let's keep it on watch in this use case. And here what we will do in this data mapper table, let's write here this as first name. Let me just turn off the caps lock. So I'm just writing here these things, first name, and here let's write as a name, last name. So here what we will do, whatever the so these two things would be acting as a header. Okay, let's suppose this is a header. Okay, so this assume these are this first row as a header, and second row is something the actual value we need to map. So let's suppose for a first name we want to map the first name text field, right? So our property ID for that one was also first name. So here I will write this as first name, the property ID of the text field which is used to capture the first name, and here we will write last name. Or let's maybe change this, instead of putting this, let's change it at first name. So in this way we can differentiate, right? Both are different, and we want to consider this rule. We want to consider this row. So that is why what we will do here, we need to write it as true. I will explain you this, what is this true and how we can logically set this true. So just see this for 2 minutes, so you'll get an idea what happens with the data mapper. Okay, so we have configured these things. Okay, first name and last name as the property IDs of that fields, and we have kept that thing on a watch. So let me refresh this. Yeah, so this is not a UI component, right? This is something a data processing and event. So from now, whatever these components we are going to see, these are not going to come on the screen, right? They are not a, they are used for manipulation logic or whatever the logic we write. These components would be used for that. So as we have used this data mapper component on this module, we don't see anything on the screen. It is like a backend thing which is used to deal with the logic. So let me close this. Let me write here as MS and as Dhoni. Okay. So here if I just enter this, what you will see is in the data, this name is there, right? But if you see here, we have a data mapper, and now if you expand this data mapper, everything that we have put first name and last name, that is enclosed in an array. Okay, it is enclosed in an array, and that array is having an object. So this one. So if you see, this is how we have. If I just copy this, let me put it as JSON viewer, so we'll get a proper idea like how that object is there. Yeah, so if you see, this is an array, and inside that array whatever the things we have put, it is enclosed inside this object. So this is how a normal form values we have manipulated into a array of object pattern. So this is what the main use of data mapper is, right? And here let's add something like maybe I would add here a number component, and maybe put it here as net worth. Okay, I'm just putting it here that number component. Here I will write as label net worth. Sorry, it was a typo. Okay, so let me save this. So what we have done, we can map this, and let me add one column. So if you want to add the column, you can just click here and click on add column, and here you can put it as a status. Okay, let's put this as a status. So what we are going to do, instead of directly mapping that net worth property ID here, we can use that net worth property ID, but conditionally we will set some value here. So what I will do, I will use this if formula. Okay, so what is this if formula, right? We are going to deal with this formulas and all those things very often now going forward. So whatever the formulas that we use in Excel, right? Excel workbook, Excel sheet, that same formula we can use here. So in Excel we have this if formula where we put the condition. So we write in this format where is equal to this name of that function or a formula, and here what we will write that condition. So what we will write is if net worth is greater than 100, let's assume this, then we want to map the string as great. If not, then write at oops. Okay, I'm just writing this thing just to explain you this concept. So what we are doing, we are going to set the value of status with this formula, and this formula is something we'll look for a net worth value. If it is greater than 100, then the value of status would be great. If it is not, then it will set it as oops. Okay, so this is what we have done. Let's see in action. So here I will write it as maybe again MS Dhoni, and here let's put it as 150. Okay, so now if we see that data mapper, so see now this value is something mapped as great because the value is greater than 100. So if we now put this value as maybe 80, which is less than 100, so we had mapped the value as oops, right? So let's see if it is mapped there. Yeah, so it is like mapped as oops here in this case. So this is how we can conditionally set the values, whether it should be that or this, based on the formulas. So again, as I said, these formulas are something you can use whatever the formulas which are applicable in Excel. That's that same formula you can use here also. And here I said like we had write true, so it means we need to consider this thing. We need to consider this row. Okay, if it is true, so this also we can map it conditionally. I can write here as if maybe I can put the same logic here just to explain you that. So if net worth is greater than 100, then put it as true. Sorry. And put it as or it is false. So if we consider this as false, then in that case please include this in double quotes and close. So we are on a fly conditionally deciding whether it should be a true or false. So if it is true, then this values would be considered. If not, then this row won't be considered. Okay. So let me show you that. We have saved. Let's refresh. So as we know, like it will be, if it is greater than 100, it will be set to true. Let's put it false condition first. So what I will do, I'll write here some random string, random name, and let's put it here as 80, which is less than 100. So now ideally that row should be false, and here nothing should be there. Okay, I think I have done one minor thing. Here we have includes this thing in string, but it shouldn't be. It should be a normal boolean value. Let's try this. Save. We write here this name. We put it 90, which is again less than 100. Let's see what happens here. Okay, so if you see here, we are not getting anything. That entire row is not considered because the value is less than 100. So that is why true and false plays a role in that way, where we need to use that row or not. Let's put it greater than 100. So now it should be a true. So dynamically the value should be set to true, and we'll get the values. That's it. So in this way we can dynamically play around with data mapper. So if we want to manipulate our entire form, or we need to modify that form into an object, then in this way we can use this data mapper according to your use case. And yeah, so here we have these things like watch, and below that we have watch field, which means which field data to watch to refresh the map. So which means now what is happening, if I just show you here, when I say watch, so if I change this first name on the right side in the console, you see this data mapper component is getting triggered. Even if I put it here as something value here, so on this value also this data mapper component is changing, and even though on network, which is number component, this is getting triggered. So yeah, this is getting triggered. So it is by default watching all these components, which are the input fields here, and if any value changes out of this, it is getting triggered. But if you want to trigger, if you want to watch only one value, right? So in that case, we can just write here as first name. So it means now only this data mapper will get triggered if first name is getting modified. So let's see. So now if I put it here, this is getting triggered, but if I now write the values here, it will not get triggered. So see, we are not getting anything here, right? That component is not getting triggered because we are just watching one field, which is first name, so that we have configured in this data mapper. So this is how this configuration works. Okay, now let's see one more thing here in the data mapper. which is wrapping table. Okay, so if I toggle on this, what will happen is now that entire values, right, whatever we are putting, that would be mapped to a HTML table. So let me write here something. So if you see this data mapper key, now we are not getting that array of object because it has converted this entire details into a HTML table, right? So if I just expand this, you can see this is a HTML table. Now this thing is something we can use on the screen to show a table, right? So if I just copy the string and I'll just put this table, HTML table in this content component. So now what you will see is you'll see all these details I mean this thing is HTML table and you can see that thing on the screen. Yeah, so if you see this is like entire thing is rendered into a table. So yeah, this is not something used that much, but yeah, this is mostly the use is like to manipulate into a array of object. But yeah, there is this capability where it is used for that purpose also to convert it to a HTML table.
Mapper is this is not something very useful to use, but yeah, good to know things. So yeah, restrict search to array. So what it means is uh, this is what it has given. So when it's set to on, data mapper only iterates through the array defined in the watch field setting, right? So as we know, uh, here whatever the things that we have mentioned in the watch field, so when it is turned to on, when we toggle on this, it will only look into the things whatever we have mentioned here in this watch field setting. Okay, and what is here, like, include all fields, which means when we toggle on this, then whatever the rows that we put here, okay, irrespective of whether it is true or false or whether there are any values present in that rows or not, it will be still considered, okay, in this case. But if it is toggled off, then in that case, if the values here, okay, in the next rows here, if it is some values we have put, and if this values are empty, so in that case that empty object would be omitted. So this is what they have given here in this documentation. So what it says is, when it's set to on, data mapper add columns defined in data mapper table into data mapper array. Okay, that is what I told. And this includes fields that don't contain any data. So for example, if a go given row contain no data in value b column, the array will include value b, it's not row. So this is what it is given. So I'm just telling you this thing in the documentation because this is the current configuration of this, right? But tomorrow Unqork might introduce a new functionality to it, right? So to know better about it, you can just click on documentation. You will be directed to the specific components documentation uh, section, and you can just read through it if you are having any queries on it. So this is why, like, you should be having this habit to go through the documentation of this thing, because there are new updates which are been constantly done into Unqork platform, and this feature might tweak, uh, or like might be removed, or maybe new features would be added into it. So yeah, just to be aware about it, this is a documentation thing you can go through in detail. But yeah, whatever I have explained you, that is something, the 90% requirement of this data mapper. This is what this component would be used in. Apart from that, there won't be any use cases you would be using these things that much, but yeah, it is good to know that things. Okay, so that's it from this today's video. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please subscribe, and you can access our Unqork zero to expert playlist from my YouTube channel, and you can go through the videos if you haven't gone through the previous videos to get a flow, or you are in sync. Okay, so see you in the next video, guys. Thank you.